Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. In this video we are going to make a user authentication system using Flask and MongoDB. We are going to make it more or less from scratch, and there is not going to be a whole lot of editing in the video. I'm going to leave in any mistakes or stumbling that I do along the way. I will go back after the fact and add some timestamp links so that if you would prefer not to see some of that stuff, you can skip past it. But I think it's good sometimes to show when you have trouble while you're working on this stuff and how you resolve it so that other people can learn from that as well. With that being said, we are going to start this with a bit of a story. The story starts with a Google search for MongoDB Flask user authentication, and for me right now, where I'm at least, it comes up with the first results is this Medium article here, which I've loaded up, but I'll click through it. This is a Medium article that describes a way to build a user authentication system using Flask and MongoDB, so it sounds like what we want. But I was trying to do this the other day. I clicked through to here. I was looking at this, and a couple of things caught my eye. So if we look in the register view right here, password comes in from the form, gets posted from the front end, presumably. We take the password, and then right here, insert one. We're creating in the MongoDB an object with a username and a password, and those are just getting stored in plain text. The password comes right out of the form right there, and the password goes right into the database right there in plain text. There's no hashing or anything else going on with that, which if you have ever worked with any kind of authentication system or database that has an authentication system in it, you probably hopefully know that that's not really the best way to do that. It would be best if this password were not just stored in plain text, but rather got hashed, and then the hash was stored. And here to see more or less the same thing in the login function. When the user's going to log in, the form argument comes in from the front end right there, and we just are looking it up. This time with a find one, look that up. The user. I should say, look up the document that has, a username equal to username and the password equal to password. And again, that's just in plain text. There's no kind of hashing or any other logic going on there. To this person's credit, they mentioned down here somewhere at the end, you can expand upon this foundation, add some more things like this and this and this, and password hashing for enhanced security. So it seems that on some level they know better a little bit, but for whatever reason, the article that is here, shows the way to do this, which is just in plain text, which is really not a good way to do it. And so this was kind of my inspiration for sitting down and making this video with a different way to do it, so that hopefully we can have a couple more good examples, or at least one more good example of how to do this. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna tell you what you will need in order to do this. If you would like to follow along with the video, I would encourage you to do that. If you just want to skip around and see the end, you can do that. I'll also post a link to the final version of the code out on GitHub, so if you just want to clone that and start from there, you'll be able to do that as well. But I will post it up after the video, and so the link will be in the description, but not in the video here. If you do want to do this, the couple things you need installed on your computer: Python 3, MongoDB. MongoDB has a user interface called Compass. I'm going to use that to create a couple of things in the database, but it is optional. You could use the Mongo shell if you wanted instead. Those are the main two requirements that you need to have installed. Obviously, you need whatever kind of editing environment and whatever other tools like a terminal and a text editor and whatever else you want to use to develop it. You're going to need a few other things like that. I'm not going to go over all of those, but the primary two are those, so make sure you've got those installed. I'm not going to show the install as part of this video. My environment's already set up. If you're looking for an installation tutorial, you could leave a comment if that's something that you're interested in me trying to record. For me, I can tell you it'd be on Linux. If you're looking for a different platform, maybe search around on YouTube or on the internet. I'm sure there are great tutorials out there. If you do really want to see a Linux installation tutorial, though, drop a comment. Maybe I'll consider that in the future. You also need these Python requirements installed. So pymongo is the module that lets you interface with MongoDB from your Python code. Flask is the web server that we're going to use, and there is a library called Flask-Login, which we are going to make use of for some bits of our user authentication logic. And before I dive right into the code, one more thing I wanted to do was throw out a couple of links which are helpful. I'll keep them on the screen here for a minute, and then I'll go through and show you what they are. So we saw the Medium article, which was the first results for me on Google for this. There were a couple of other results which were quite helpful, which did have much better approaches, hashing the passwords, for instance, but also just the code was a little bit better and more close to something that you could use in the real world. So I wanted to shout those out. These are basically what this video will be based upon, essentially. This one is a really, really good tutorial, Flask mega tutorial. I had not seen this before, but it seems like this is a thing that's been around for a little bit, and there's a 2024 version. This has a load of different things, 23 different chapters that all dive into different parts of the Flask web framework, and this particular one that I'm in is what, chapter, I guess? Well, I suppose we're not in a chapter per se. We're in a post. We are in a chapter. I just didn't read close enough. We are in chapter 5 right now, user logins of the Flask mega tutorial. So that's the URL for that. Shout out, huge thanks to Miguel Greenberg for publishing this. This is super cool. Apparently it looks like there's a print version maybe that goes along with this, so I'll probably be checking that out as well, because it would be nice to have a physical copy of this to reference too. So user logins, this was great. It does not use MongoDB. It uses SQL Alchemy in order to store the user information. So that's a SQL database. In my case, part of my inspiration for wanting to do this was learning MongoDB specifically. So this was a good resource, but I couldn't just take it exactly because I did want to tie in MongoDB. The other one that I came across was a Stack Overflow answer and question, I suppose, which is a person who's referencing that Flask mega tutorial right there. So they link to that. They say I was following this, but I have modified it to use MongoDB. Now what they've done is they've used a library called Mongo Engine, or maybe this is Flask Mongo Engine. I'm not familiar with that, and in my case, I did not necessarily want to use it. I wanted to keep it as basic as I could. So this was also a very helpful resource. I referenced this many times looking at some different parts of it, but in the end, I did deviate from it some because I did not want to use that Mongo Engine thing. So hug report to this person as well. It was super handy. Kurt Foster on Stack Overflow, thanks for this answer. This helped me out quite a bit. In fact, why don't I upvote it? I don't know why I'm not logged in here. I'll have to grab the other browser on my logged in account to upvote that, which I definitely will do. Okay. Two more things which are kind of helpful. The pymongo API documentation you can find here. I referenced a lot in working on this. There's lots of obviously useful information in here if you're trying to use pymongo. And then Flask-Login, the library that we're going to use for the actual user authentication portion of it, is right here, and this is their documentation, or their main page, which includes their documentation. I referenced a bunch of information in here as well in order to get this working. Okay, so with that, I'm going to dive in. We're going to do this more or less from scratch, and again, I'm going to leave in any kind of whoopsies and stumbling along the way. Hopefully it's not too bad. But I think it is good again to show that stuff and show how I work through it. So this is not my first time doing this. I ran through a similar process just recently, so hopefully it's still fresh in my brain. This will be good extra practice, and this will be a good chance for you to follow along if you want to try to learn how to do this. So I'm just going to make a Flask MongoDB user auth tutorial. Obviously, name yours whatever you want, store it wherever you want. I am just going to pick an existing one. I'm just going to do that for now, and then I already have a virtual environment. Well, maybe we'll give it. Maybe I'll do a new virtual environment. Yeah, let's do a new one. Virtual env. Go there. MongoDB. I don't know why the bottom half of my window is kind of jacked there. Okay, don't worry. So I'm using PyCharm here as the editor. Don't worry if you're not using PyCharm. You can still do this without just, here's the code that it generated, which is not much. Bare bones Flask. You could copy this out of the Flask getting started page if you want it as well. But yeah, if you need to, pause here, write this out if you're trying to follow along. The only other stuff that it generated is a folder called static, a folder called templates, and then in my case, I chose to have it make a virtual environment. So if you are not using PyCharm, then make the virtual environment however you want and get yourself loaded into it. And then we need to install those requirements, which were pymongo, Flask, and Flask-Login. All right, those should be installed now. Let's see. Can we run this already and try to access the page? So that says it's running on port 5000. Perfect. We have our Hello World page. Okay, so let's real quick make a, let's say this page is going to be public page that anyone is allowed to see. And then we're going to make another page /private, which is going to be private page that only that you must be logged in to see. Okay, so we need to rerun for that to take effect. Oops. We need to change the name of this. And rerun it. Okay. So now the main page says public page, anyone's allowed to see this. And if we were to go to private, currently it does let us see this, obviously, because we haven't set up any of the user authentication. But our goal will be to add something to this one here to where you will only be able to see this page when you're logged in, but anyone, like it says right there, anyone will be able to see this page whether they're logged in or not. This is a relatively common paradigm with web applications. So obviously when you go on and implement this in your real project, you'll have something similar to this. Your private page will probably have more interesting stuff than just some text on it, and your public page will be like a front page for the website or whatever. But with this one, we are going to keep it super duper basic. In fact, I'm aiming for the most basic that I can get. So we're going to stick with just that for our public and our private pages. So the next thing that we can do is let's get set up here. So we need to make sure MongoDB is running. In fact, I happen to know that MongoDB is not running. So let's get MongoDB running, which we can do on my computer with... Actually, let's check. It is not running currently. Okay, sudo MongoD. So if you're on Linux, this is a way that you can start it. It should now be running. If we status, we have some more stuff. We can exit that with Q. And I'm going to also start up the compass. Is it this? Yeah. Okay. So, and again, compass is optional. You don't have to use compass if you don't want to. You could use the shell, but I'm just going to use compass because it's nice and easy and it's more visual, and I am recording a video. So we'll use this. I'm not going to use it for very much. Basically, we're just going to use this to create a database, maybe a couple other things. That's pretty much it. You could do all that stuff super easy from the shell. You could also even just do it in the Python code as well once you have pymongo in the mix. Okay, so what I am going to use it for is we're going to create a database. I'm just going to create a new database for this. So new database name is user auth tutorial. Hopefully I spelled that right. Collection. We're gonna go ahead and create a collection as well. I'm gonna create a collection of users. Time series, nope. Additional preferences. I think we can just leave all that off. Create that. So now we have user auth tutorial, and we have a users collection. So we can create documents for users here. And that's basically all we need. One more thing I am gonna do though. Just for now, I am actually going to add one just so we can like kind of validate that our Python tie-in is working. I'm a big fan of like do one thing and then kind of prove it works, basically. Check and make sure it's working. So we can just add some stuff here. I'm going to add a username. And I'm going to add a password hash, which I'm gonna set to just something keyboard smash for right now. And we're not gonna use this one for real, so does not want to let me. Oh, I need commas. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we have one object. Just to be able to make sure that our pymongo integration is working. So let's do that next. We need to, let me pull this. Okay, so we already have this started. We need to import pymongo or Mongo client. Yep, that's what we want right there. Import Mongo client. And then I'm just going to test it by randomly throwing it here in this view. We'll delete it later, but this is just kind of a convenient place to throw some code for right now. So we're going to do that. Let's see here. The code we want to do is basically connect up with our database. So I'm going to go, we're going to make a function for this in a minute, get database. And this is going to be the name of our database, which we just created was user auth tutorial. All right, we don't have this function yet. Let's get creating that. Def get database. That's going to take a DB name. And this is basically going to just use the connection stuff for us. So connection string. Yep. Default. Good job. I think maybe you can use that, but we don't need it, and I'm more used to doing it this way, so I'm going to do it this way first. Yep, we can create a client, and again, if you're not using PyCharm, if you don't have this like IntelliSense stuff going on here, feel free to pause and type out whatever you need, but basically we're going to create the string which points to our MongoDB server. Mine's on localhost and default port. We're going to create a client object with Mongo client there that we imported. And then we can just get back out of Shoutouts and return client DB name. That's going to connect to the database. It's going to grab, it's going to connect to the MongoDB instance. Then it's going to grab just the database that we ask for, and it's going to return the connection to that, which we'll then have in the DB variable right there. So the next thing we can do is get our actual users collection. So I'm going to say users collection is DB users, and indeed that was what we named it, right? DB users, yes, okay. Users, okay, and so then we should be able to go just like print users collection, find, and in fact, yeah, we could just do find by itself. And yeah, it's a cursor. Let's do print list find so that we can see the actual data. Okay, there we go. So we are definitely connected up with MongoDB. We have our connection. We're able to pull data out of there. We'll assume that we're able to put data into there as well. We'll assume that this is pretty good. I'm not going to put anything else in right now, but basically we'll say this is pretty good for now. Let's also do one more thing here where we go username. Search up a username just to make sure this works. That's going to be a dictionary. Whoops. So we only have one, and this should return that one to us. Perfect. Okay. I'm actually going to go and delete this one because we don't want to use the one that we created with Compass. Eventually, we will create a register script. I'm not going to do a register page. That's another thing. If you're interested in maybe seeing the register page get set up, leave a comment, and perhaps I'll do that one in the future. What I'll do is, for now, just make a register little command line utility for registering a user, which will be helpful if you're just trying to learn about this or set up a server with one user, basically, or one or two or whatever. If you are trying to make a real one, obviously, you would make some registration page, the registration system and everything, but we'll worry about that one in the future. So I'm going to rename this one to index. Doesn't really matter. And this stuff is working. I'm going to comment it. We will cut it out later. What do we want to do next? So next, let's do the register. Let's do the register command. Okay, so I'm going to make a new file here. I'm going to call it register. I'm going to call it register command or register CLI or something. Let's just call it register for now. And this one is going to just be run inside the command line. We're going to use this same Git database. We could maybe import it. For now, I'm just going to copy paste it so that these two things are independent, because we don't. This one won't involve Flask. It's not going to be doing the server. We don't necessarily want that server to get set up for this one. We're going to be connecting to the same database, but beyond that, there's no real connection between register and app. So we'll have Git database. We want to get an argument from the user. So we're going to say parser equals argparse, argument parser. Create a new one of those. Parser add argument. We're not going to do DB name. We're going to do username. String, that's going to be the username. Okay. Args equals parser.parse args. Yeah. And then for so username, you're going to go -- with the command line and then space and then your username. For password, I want to do it differently. For password, I actually want to use get pass. That way it doesn't print the password in plain text. Get pass. Args, we're going to go password equals get pass dot get pass. Oops. Prompt with just password. All right, let's get our database. Yes, but not args username. It is name of the DB back like we did here. I'll just copy paste so that I can't typo. We get the database, we get the users. In fact, I could have copy pasted the next line as well. And let's try to look up the user that was asked for. So args is going to have our username. Password is going to have our password. So we should be able to go, like, try to look up the user say, I don't know what it's going to throw, actually. It might just be a none, I guess. So let's not do try just yet. Let's go and look up the user. So let's say user, let's say found user equals, yeah, that's pretty much it. User collection dot find one. The username we want to search for is coming from args.username. Very good. If we actually found the user, well, if we did not find it, if it's none, that means we did not find it, which means we want to go and add the user. So we can say, let's see here, user collection dot insert one, and we are not going to do this. This is what the Medium article was doing, which is not what we want to do. Here, instead, we're going to generate the hash by using Wurzukung. I don't know the right name for that thing. Generate. We're going to pass that into this function here, which we get from this. Yeah. And in fact, yeah, we'll grab that one as well because we are going to use that later. Generate password hash right there will get called, so that's going to store the password hash. Okay, so this will insert it. It will give us the username and the password hash saved in there. It will go ahead and save it as well. So that should be good. While we're here, let's do an else and let's do a update. Update 1. Where username is args.username. Then we want to set the let's see, two things. We want to set, well, I mean, we don't really need to set the username because we just looked up the username, in fact, so we don't need to do that. We'll just say password hash equals generate password hash from password. Yeah, there we go. Let's new line this just so those are a little easier to see on one row, on one screen there. Okay, so if we do not find the user, we're going to insert a new user. If we do find the user, we're going to update the user that we found with that username and set its new password hash. So this command line tool will let us create users and let us update their passwords. So I'm going to save this and go to the terminal. We're going to try that. Python register. We do need to go username. And remember, I deleted the user from Compass, so there's no users right now. So I'm going to go username. Tell me, guy, it's going to ask for a password. It does not ask to confirm, which is a thing that often you will see with this. So maybe that's an enhancement you could add to make this better. But for now, I'll leave it at just asking once. You could always just wipe it out and redo it if you needed. Refresh this. Boom. Okay, there we go. So now we have a user that was created, and it was created with an actual password hash instead of just the tester stuff. So we're looking pretty good there. One thing, though, is we are still going to change this up a bit more. I'm going to refactor this a little bit so that we can actually have a user model class instead of just doing the sort of raw database stuff right here. Just because I think it's a little bit more convenient by the time we actually implement all of this stuff into the Flask app as well. So I'm actually going to make a new file, models. We are going to make a user class. So inside of here, we're going to want, we are going to want from Flask-Login, import the user mixin because our class is going to extend this. And we're also going to go ahead and get the Wurzukung, I'd probably do it, Workzug. Wurzukung? There's an N in that word in my head, but there totally is not in the real world, huh? We're going to get that thing because we're going to actually do that stuff inside of here with some functions. All right, class user. Class user is going to extend user mixin, and in fact, we're also going to extend dictionary, because when you pull an object out of the MongoDB like this, the value that you get back here will be pretty much a dictionary. So what we want is a dictionary object that we can basically pull out of the collection, which also will extend the user mixin, which has all the functions it needs for the rest of our project to be able to do things very easily, like check and make sure the user's logged in, test the password that they tried to log in with in order to, actually get them logged in or not. And putting it into this class will make it a lot nicer. So we're going to make a init function that takes actually some different things. It's going to take a database client, or database connection, if you want to think of it that way. It's going to take a username, and that's actually it. It's going to take just the client and the username. So the constructor here is going to serve as a bit of a lookup as well. So when you want to look up a user, you're going to call the constructor, you're going to pass in the database connection, the username. It is then going to look it up for you, and what will make it do is raise an error, raise an exception if it's not found. We do want a connection to the database. Well, we're getting that passed in. No, we don't. Yeah, we're going to get that passed in. So we're just going to look up the user. Client. So that's fake. Get user. That's not a real thing. DB client dot find one is what we really want there. That's going to be username. The username that we got passed. So if that's none, what we're going to do is raise a value error. User not found. Okay. If we do find the user, we are going to init ourselves, init the dictionary, basically, make ourselves a new instance of an empty dictionary, and then we're going to go and say, create a property so that we can keep the client and use it later. And then we're basically just going to set ourselves, the dictionary, equal to all the things that are on the found user, which we got out of the database. So basically, we're pulling this data out of the database, and we're going to put it into the self instance of our dictionary. So self key equals value. And that should get us loaded up pretty well. All right, so while we're here, let's create a couple more functions. We're going to create a set password function, which takes a new password. Yep, see, this thing is doing it good for us. Hash password, we're going to generate that from the plain text one, and then we are going to store that self-hashed. Actually, we called it password hash, I think, right? Yeah, password hash. Oh, I see. We're going to set that to this. And I'm going to actually say self.save, which we don't have existing yet, but I'm going to make self.save right there. That is going to go and basically save itself back into the MongoDB. So self.db client .update 1. And we can actually use the ID. I mean, we could use the username as well. The username should be unique. But we will also have the ID when we do this. So I'm going to say ID. ID. Yeah, and then set self. Yeah, so that's basically what we want as well. So that's going to set for every value in our self dictionary. This is going to go and set it into the pymongo. So in our case, that's going to, when we call save after updating our password hash, that is going to end up putting the new password hash into the database. In our case, that's the only thing that's changing, but because of the way we're passing self right here, we could actually change other things as well. We could update the username. We don't have any other fields on the user, but theoretically in a real system, you'd also probably have like an email and maybe some other stuff. And so you could change those things as well with this. Okay, set password. Let's do a check password. That's going to check the, hash that, and then, actually we don't even need to do that. We have the easy check, right? That's what this function right here is for. We actually just pass that straight through. Just go return. Yeah, that's exactly what we want. Is it? Self.get? I guess that's one way to do it. No, we don't want to do that. We want to, you want to do it that way? I guess it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters. I'm going to do it this way though. With the dictionary because we are extending dictionary, we're able to just access these values like this. So what we want to do is we want to test the incoming password from the user. This is going to get called whenever they attempt to log in. So this is the guess that the user has made at the password. We're going to test that against the hash that is stored in our self, which in our case means it's stored in the MongoDB because we looked ourselves up from there. And that's going to return true or false based on whether or not those password hashes match. All right. One more one we're going to do is a static method for creating the user. So in our first example there, I just put this in the register. Whoop. Okay, so create user, we do accept both a username and a password. We actually are not going to be accepting self, obviously, though, because it's static. So we're going to get client, database client instead of self. Password hash equals generate. Okay. So take the plain text password, hash it, store it in password hash. So that's going to create the new user for us. And let's see, we need still one more thing because of Flask-Login. So one more thing we want to do is we need to have a getID function, which Flask-Login is going to be calling, and it needs to return a unique ID for every user. You could use the actual ID. In my case, I am actually going to go with the username instead, though. That's just kind of the way that I've got this set up. Okay, so we've got a user model now that extends user mixin and dictionary. Let's take a quick peek at what the user mixin gives us here. See if we can find that. User mixin. User mixin, there we are. So that's going to give us all of these properties that we are allowed to use. Users logged in, users logged out, whether the login's been confirmed, they're unauthorized, they need a refresh, their session, all kinds of stuff here that this gives us access to just by extending it and then making sure that we have, a get ID and all the other things that this interface expects, basically. Okay, so now let's go back to register and let's change this up. So if the found user was none, then what we actually want to go and do is create a new user by saying user.create user. We need to pass the DB client, which is the user's collection. Okay, there we go. And then we will need to import that from our models.user. Yes, okay, right there. And then for this one, It will also be a bit different now. We're going to go and say found user equals user. So we create an instance. We pass in the DB client, which is the user's collection, and we pass in the username. And now this is going to raise a value error if that user doesn't exist. So we're going to wrap that. Let's see, we don't need that. Actually, we know the user does exist, don't we? Do we need to bother catching it? I don't think we need to bother catching that. Or we could, well, yeah, let's do it this way, actually. Let's not do... Let's not do found user up there. Let's do found user right there. We are going to try... All right, so if we don't find the user, we're going to create the user. And if we do find the user, oops, this is args.username. And if we do find the user, then we're going to update the password, found user.set password. And remember, inside of here, this is doing the hashing. So we just call it, we pass in the plain text, but it's going to get hashed and stored in there. Set password, and then that's going to save as well automatically, so we don't need to call save. All right, we can get rid of all this stuff. So now we're using our model instead of just reaching into the database directly from register here. Let's make sure this works by deleting this one again and rerunning it. Theoretically, we could add some like printouts to that, so it would tell you when it's done, but okay, so we can create users now with our little command line tool. We have a user model, which we can use to represent users in our code. We are ready, I think, to get back into the Flask part of this. So what we want is, in order for Flask-Login to work, we need to have a load user function. You need to provide a user loader callback, which just means we need to provide a function that is capable of loading users from our system, right? In our case, that's MongoDB. You know, if you use this with a different thing, that could be something else like SQL Alchemy in the big tutorial, or anything else really you could use as well. So let's go and make get user, or load user, I think it called it. Doesn't really matter. But we do need to annotate that, and we actually will need to set up one more thing as well. So we don't have login yet. They called theirs login manager. I'm going to stick with login here. And this we actually need to create like this, and it will get imported with the login manager like that. So we create the app. This was already happening before. Now we go and we pass that app to the login manager. We say login view. That's just going to be the URL or the function that handles the URL where we log in. We haven't written that yet, but we will eventually. Here we go, load user. This is going to take an ID for load user, which we used the username as the ID. So I'm actually just going to call it username. Flask-Login thinks of it as an ID, but because we defined this here to get ID to return the username, ours will actually be named. So I'm going to call this username to match what it is in the code rather than what the concept that Flask-Login thinks it is. We're going to get the database, so we can just copy. Load up the database, get the user's collection, and then we can create a user object, or try to at least. Actually, yeah, we'll try to, but if it fails, we'll just let it raise wherever it's at. So we're just going to go, in fact, we can just return, I think. Return a new user that uses the user's collection as the database, and it uses the username, which we were passed here, to look it up. We need to import that user model here as well. Okay, good. So now Flask-Login will be able to call this function automatically and use it to look up a user out of our database for us. Okay, so we're getting pretty close now. We are, I think, ready to make a login view. So let's do that. In fact, let's put it above here. Let's keep these consistent. This one can do both get and post. I'm going to do get first. Those just to make it happy for a second here. What is this, Matt? Can I find... this got imported for something weird, maybe? Yeah, this got imported for something weird. We want Flask request. Okay, I'm going to make a very basic login page. HTML login.html, that will go automatic. Login. Okay, this is just going to have a form. The form is going to have a method of post. It's going to have an input type text. Label. Username. Name. Username. ID. Username. We're just going to make it the same. These may not be as necessary, but I think it's proper to put them. Username, we messed up. Actually, let's grab both. But for the password, we're going to make it type password so that it will obscure it. Submit button. Okay. We have HTML page, the most basic login page we could ever imagine. It is called login HTML. It's inside static. So then when we have a GET request here, we can return, what is it? It's like serve from directory or something. Let's see here. Send from directory. That'll come from Flask. Interesting, Workzug has that too. So then we say the directory is static, the file is login HTML. Save that. Let's run it and see if it works. Rerun this. So here we go, login, not found. /login. we go. Didn't have my route there correctly. Okay, so now we can see the login page. For this, let's get those. Okay. Let's print that and just make sure that it comes through. So let's restart this again. There is like an auto thing we could do. I'm not going to mess with it for now, though. All right, so it did successfully print this. It also raised an exception because we didn't return a response. That's fine. That's fine. Let's just do a something like this for now, okay? We'll eventually change that. Let's just make sure there's no other problems with it besides that. There we go. Okay, yeah, we're looking good there. We're posting it. We got our values. We are returning. We're not having any other errors. Okay, very good. So now we're ready to do some actual login bits here in the posting. So with that, I'm gonna redo this. Actually, we're gonna rename this one to incoming. I just like to be super explicit with that variable. His password is kind of general, right? It could mean the password that came in, or it could mean the real password in the database. Obviously, in our case, we're storing the hash, so we don't have the real one. But being a little bit more specific with the name there, I think is good. All right, we're going to get the database. We could maybe just put this at the top, I suppose. But for now, I'm just going to reconnect each time. Get the database connection there. And we go and look up the user, basically. So try to create a user instance. Found user with our database connection, which is that, and the username, which is that. If we do not find the user, we're just going to return invalid username or password. So we're going to keep the error very generic. We're not going to tell them the specific error. We're just going to say that login failed. In fact, we could just take this as our base return here as well. So it will say if we make it to the very end of this without returning any other thing, we're just going to return the error. All right, so next up, we know that we found a user with that username. We want to check whether the password that this user has guessed is correct or not. And in order to do that, we're going to use our check password function, which we created on the user model right here. So we just go found user.checkPassword with the incoming password. We can say if that, so that's going to return true if the incoming password does successfully match the hash that's stored. We'll go else here as well, and we can just return this same exact message if the password is wrong. But if the password is correct, that's when we're going to actually call login user, which is a function that we get from Flask-Login right there, which is going to go and actually set the session keys and all kinds of stuff for the user inside of I guess cookies or session storage or something. I'm not actually sure where, but it's going to set them into the requests without us doing anything else, which is super nice. So we're just going to log in that user. This is the found user. And we are going to return a redirect. We're just going to send them right over to the private page. All right, so if they successfully get past the password check, we're going to call login, the Flask-Login function, which is going to, from then on, treat that user as logged in. It's going to let them into views which require logins, which we still haven't set that part up yet, but we're getting pretty close. And it's also going to manage the session for us without having to worry about it. It will put that information on the user's request session. Okay. So I think, in fact, we are ready now to go, and on our private page right here, we can go and put login required, which we'll have to import. That's from Flask-Login. So we import that. It's a method decorator. As login is required on that. We do have a login endpoint for being able to actually log in. Yeah, let's test and see how this is working. Refresh that. So for one thing, let's just go right now to private and see what happens. We got an internal server error. Okay, let's get this. Let's see. Session was unavailable because no secret key was set. Secret key is set the secret key on the application to something unique and secret. Yes, okay. In order to use sessions, we need to have a secret key. So in order to use sessions, we need a secret key. And we are trying to use sessions because Flask-Login and this decorator, as well as this function right here, login user, both of those are attempting to use the sessions. The sessions rely on there being a secret key. I did not have a secret key, therefore it did not work. I'm just going to go we're going to go equals os.get environment Flask secret key, and it actually wants bytes, so we're going to encode that to get bytes instead of a string. Since I'm in PyCharm, the way that I add an environment variable is with my run configuration here. If you are not in PyCharm, if you have a Linux type shell, obviously you could do like export, something like this, key equals whatever, right? I will leave that to you to figure out how to get that into your environment variable, but that's where you need to put it. And it can just be any random thing. I will make one by just going to a Python console, going import secrets, and going secrets.token. We'll get a URL safe of like 40 or something. All right, obviously I won't use this on a deployment since I've now shown it in the video. You obviously want to keep this secret, hence the name secret. Let's see, environment variables here. We can go equals value. So our semicolons, but I only have one, so we're just going to try like that. Maybe I'll use an M file. That's actually probably more convenient, but let's try it this way. Run that. Okay, that's running. Let's go to, private. There we go. Okay, perfect. So private now redirected us to the login page. So we tried to go to private, but it was like, hey, you're not logged in. You got to go to the login page. We can still access the public page, the index. This is a public page that anyone can see. We can still see that. But now we can no longer see private. We get automatically redirected to the login, which is exactly what we want. And that is all coming from this decorator right here is now protecting this view, this function, this page, protecting it and saying you must be logged in order to see this page. If you're not, you are going to get redirected automatically to the login view, which we set back here. In our case, that's this one right here, which is showing them the login page and allowing them to log in. All right, so let's test an actual login and see if this is working. I do have a user here. I think I remember the password to it, so let's try it out. Invalid username or password. So let me just make sure, if it had worked, it should have redirected us to private, but instead we were returned invalid username or password. So one of a few things happened. Either there was a value error, meaning we did not find the user successfully, or we did find the user, but the password check failed. Therefore, return that as well. This is yellow, probably because it can't actually be reached now because we have a try except. So let's just get rid of that. All right, maybe I didn't remember the password as well as I thought. So what we're going to do is rerun this. Okay, that has now changed. And again, we go to private. It's not letting us because we failed to log in. There we go. Look at that. So now we are at /private. It redirected for us, and this is now the private page. You must be logged in order to see. So I am now successfully logged in. I'm able to see the secret page behind the login wall. So that's super cool. We can, of course, still see the public page too. We go back to index. That's still there. And we can then navigate back, and it does keep us logged in there in the background. We don't have to log in each and every time. There is a session, I assume, with some expiration date or something. I would guess that that's all configurable with Flash-Login. I haven't gotten Flask-Login, is what I meant to say. I'm guessing that's all configurable in there. I haven't dig that deep into it just yet. But this is where we are now. We're able to log in. Is there anything else that I would like to do before we wrap this one up? I think that's basically what I wanted to show in this video. So I know it's very basic, but that's my goal here, is to just show a quick run through of the most basic Flask and MongoDB server, which has a user authentication system, and importantly, which does not store the passwords in plain text, which instead does follow the best practices and store those passwords in a hashed manner, and in our case even making use of previously written security libraries, which are public and well audited, instead of trying to roll our own, relying on those things rather than trying to roll our own. That's really what I wanted to show here. If you found this useful, feel free to drop a thumbs up, a like on the YouTube. I would appreciate it. Drop any comments if you have suggestions, ideas, questions, anything like that. Hope you had a good time watching this. Hope you're able to learn something. And that's it for now. I will see you later. Thanks again.